Kevin Gaither. I am running to be your next U.S. House of Representative. I'm not the moderate candidate, I'm not the progressive candidate, and I'm not the establishment candidate. I am the only candidate in either party that has actually implemented a comprehensive health care program for tens of thousands of Americans. I'm also the only candidate in the Democratic primary that has bothered to file FEC reports at all. I am literally the ground up candidate. Last night was actually in Rossville, not too far from here, north of Danville, rolling out our historic buildings and small business work group program. And this is a way to kind of jumpstart some of our small towns and small communities in the 15th district. I cannot wait to answer your questions today, and I'm so glad to see so many good people here.
Hi, my name's John. I don't think I have to tell you guys at this point I'm doing something different. I've met most of you before, I've canvassed with some of you, I've called a lot of you guys on the phone, and some of you all have given me $25, and I really appreciate that. I've been all through this before. I've given you a math lesson. We need to overcome 105,000 votes. That means even if we increase voter registration by 20%, voter turnout by 20%, we still need to flip about 41,000 people that voted for Republican last time. I've talked about history, how we've run a series of moderates for the past 20 years, and I've talked about political science, how the voters in this district, Republican or Democrat, they don't value a issues-based moderate candidate. And so what I've shown, I think, is that I'm the progressive candidate, and I'm the one that Republicans can trust to vote for. Thank you so much.
Good evening. My name's Craig Morton, running for the United States Congress 15th District. I want to make sure I thank everybody here coming out tonight. I really do appreciate it, and the staff, Vermillion County Democratic Party hosting it, and the Danville Community College also. As you probably know from my biography, healthcare is my strongest point and one of the main reasons why I'm running. I've been in healthcare all my life. Why I keep looking back with that bottle of insulin that cost $8 or $10 back in 1995, and it's the same bottle that I have in the fridge at the pharmacy now for $300, and it's the exact same bottle. Also, I was born and raised in a small town, Salem, Illinois, and I've seen the struggles for sustainability and survival. It just feels like it's death by 1,000 cuts out there from the federal government, and with little help from the federal government and the corporations there. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Erica C. Weaver. Thank you guys for coming out. I am running because I am the only candidate who has actually lived the experiences of the people in this district. I am the only candidate who has lived through those experiences and transitioned into a different position. I think that we deserve to have someone in the room who can speak up and be a voice for people who are struggling and understand what those policies do and what they mean to people, and I'm that person. So I hope that you give me a chance. I hope that you listen to our questions, ask as many questions as possible, look at my website, and I always tell people I'll bet on me anytime, any day, and I ask that you do that too. Thank you.
The first question is on healthcare, and it goes like this. For many voters, the protection of access to healthcare for individuals with pre-existing health conditions is an important issue in upcoming elections. As a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, what legislation would you support to protect access to health care for all U.S. citizens, including those with pre-existing health conditions?
So this is an important issue that's actually very important to me, and one of the reasons why I almost lost my life about 8-9 years ago when I had a pre-existing condition that I couldn't get coverage for when I was waiting tables, and I couldn't find any place that would offer me more than 32 hours a week, or even a restaurant that even offers insurance. Try finding one of those. And so I carried something around for about 9 years until it almost killed me. Obamacare literally saved my life. So making sure that other people don't have to go through that same thing is one of my highest priorities. I have said before, and I've been on record as saying I support Medicare for all, but I realize as a freshman congressperson that obviously I'm not going to be in those back rooms making those kinds of deals. And so I have to be pragmatic and vote for the solution that's going to cover the most people, that's going to cover all people. That if there are going to be premiums, to make sure that we have guarantees that they're going to be lower. And so going back to my values-based approach, what I like to do is make sure that we value human life, that we value a woman's right to choose, that we value people not having to go bankrupt in order to get care. Those are all things that I've had to go through, I've had family members had to go through in my life, and I want to make sure that nobody else has to do that either. Thank you.
Okay, the kind of good healthcare insurance that is available out there right now, it would be impossible for that to be maintained without the pre-existing clause in there. The pre-existing condition clause is mandatory. There's no way we could survive without that. That being said, the Affordable Care Act is one of the best pieces of legislation that I have ever seen. It has its flaws. There's a lot of people always griping at it, trying to chip at the ends. But since that legislation has been there, the pharmacy, I've had nobody declare bankruptcy on me that I can think of, and that was fairly frequent before. I don't have people worried about having to get divorced or losing their houses for some weird accident or just getting sick. So the Affordable Care Act, it is there. It might be pricey, but you're not going to lose your house. Thank you.
As of right now, I agree with Craig. The Affordable Health Care Act does include coverage for pre-existing conditions. The Medicare for All bill or act as it has been presented does not clearly define that it will cover pre-existing conditions. And so for me to support that as a member of the House, I would want to make sure that the act and the bill included pre-existing conditions, because that is a very large issue, especially because most Americans haven't had coverage. And so some of their issues haven't been diagnosed yet. I don't want them to be excluded simply because, has it been a minute and a half already? But I don't want them to be excluded because they didn't have medical coverage before, and now that they are able to get that, that they're excluded. So I would want to make sure that we either support the Affordable Health Care Act as it is and make it more expansive, or if we're going to have a Medicare for All, that it is inclusive of pre-existing condition coverage.
Okay, first off, we defeat President Trump in the 2020 election. That's the first thing we do, right? The next thing we do is we enshrine pre-existing coverage by passing that law by itself through the U.S. House and make sure that we do that in the Senate and get that signed by the next president. Because President Trump is never going to do that. He doesn't stand with the American people and people that are living with chronic illness and with that are living with disabilities. That's what we do. The other thing is we do have an out-of-control executive branch right now, especially with Trump at the helm. We need to make sure that we protect people that are that have health issues. Right now there is an assault on people that are on disability, for instance, through the disability review process. The real focus of this effort is to break the Social Security Administration and therefore ultimately privatize it if Trump is reelected. We need to understand the real threats to healthcare, and the threats, well, those threats are from both within and without. I believe that when we work together as a party, we come up with the best solutions, and we need to come together and find where we agree as opposed to where we divide ourselves. Medicare for All is a great ambition, but where does it agree with the people that understand how to implement healthcare reform? We can't take a system that has only that covers 15% of Americans, which is Medicare, and expand it to 100% without increasing the information and technology upgrades in the current system. You just can't go from 15% to 100% overnight. Thank you.
First off, I believe I just want to do a quick fact check, and you guys can go on your phones. Clap one time in the back if you can hear me. Yeah, thank you. So, teacher right here, so let's do a little bit of a history lesson. What I tell my AP US history class is that America, Frederick Jackson Turner, the historian, said, we're not idealists in America, we're pragmatists. And so that means we do the best with what we've got. We don't have to have a system just like the healthcare system in England or in Canada or other places where people might have complaints about, legitimate or otherwise. We can have a system that works for everybody. We can be pragmatists. And I think, again, you can fact check that. Medicare for All does cover pre-existing conditions. That's a plan that works, but we can be pragmatic and also have a plan that covers all people, that guarantees premiums go down, that gives our country the right to negotiate drug prices. Those are all things that are within our power to do, that are popular on both sides of the aisle, and that we can all fight for. Thank you.
The Affordable Care Act, one point I was trying to get to is that it is a very important piece of legislation. Instead of chipping away at it and griping about it, we need to have 1 year, 2 year, 5 year plans. Every year, every 2 years, figure out what isn't right, fix it. What is needed, pick up alternatives and expand on it. And go ahead and expand on the Affordable Care Act and use that as a base of our future insurance for the United States. Thank you.
I don't really have anything additional in terms of what type of plan, because I stand by what I said. I have looked at the act as it has been presented by Senator Sanders. It does not highlight pre-existing conditions. However, my position is that we have to be able to fund anything that we put forth. And we know that things have been approved and mandated federally, but they have not been fully funded. And I am not going to support something that's not going to be funded so that people are partially covered or that they lose their coverage. That doesn't benefit anyone. And so when we talk about being sick for years, or people who have not been able to get dental coverage because they only get partial coverage, or because there's some fundamental thing that is flawed, or the government shuts down, or I'm not going to put people in that position. That's not fair. That's not responsible. That's not who I am as a person. That's not who I am as a mother. That's not who I am as a public defender. It is not who I would be in Congress, and I am not going to misrepresent what I can and cannot do.
Well, let's be clear. You have to understand how the rural healthcare system works and how it does not for people. If you need a specialist in this district, you have to travel sometimes 100 miles to get your condition taken care of. We need a mobile healthcare system that provides those services directly to the people, because so many people that are living with these conditions just don't have the resources to travel that far. We also need to attack prescription drug reform and make sure that we negotiate these prices for especially Medicare Part D, which is a mess. You could thank the Republicans for that, another one of these unfunded mandates. There's a lot of ground that most people agree with the reforms that are necessary. We just need to get that across the line. Thank you.
Survival is a top concern for many Americans. A low-income population can no longer count on social programs, but the U.S. budget deficit again has increased. Do you favor increasing or reducing Social Security benefits, Medicare, Medicaid, Link, WIC, and school breakfast and lunch programs? And how would you do that?
First of all these programs are just ingrained in our society. I know there's a lot of talk about trying to get rid of them or whittle them away, but it's going to be impossible. The need is there, and when the need is there, they're not going to go anywhere. Like I said with the ACA, work on 1, 2, 3, 5-year plans, what works and what doesn't. And crappy or bad things were not working, or 10, 20 years old in these social programs, fix them and move them forward. As far as Social Security goes, the group that has the most difficult time, there's that low income where they are beginning to retire, and they may not have a house, they may rent, they don't have a 401k or a great pension or a great 401k for that matter. we need to bring those people up. I mean, they go to Social Security and retire, I see them into poverty range already. That the low end of Social Security needs to be 100% poverty up to 120, they gotta pick a number and evaluate that on a continuous basis based on inflation, and especially for the elderly, especially in the drug prices. Thank you.
In relation to or consideration of the varied services that are available to people who are living in poverty, whether it's WIC or our SNAP program, what we know is that the SNAP program has not been recalculated since the early 60s. So if we're going to continue that program as we should also do so in a manner that is considerate of the current prices for food in this country. If we are going to continue with the WIC program, we have to be responsible and be considerate of the fact that diets have changed for children and their families, and so we can't keep using this traditional formula. We have to be considerate of housing choice vouchers and the fact that people are relegated to areas of poverty, and we should give them opportunities to get elevated rental payments in areas where their families can flourish and be safe and be well taken care of. So yes, we need to keep those programs, but we need to make them up to date and make them beneficial for people. And I say that because I have used all of those, and I don't have to make up stuff and I don't have to borrow it from someone else. I have lived in every one of those instances. I have used those programs. My children are healthy because of them. I am a graduate of law school because of them. Although when I wanted to move to Chicago and go to law school and use my housing choice voucher, I was denied the opportunity to live in good areas with my family. That is why I commuted from Mattoon to Chicago for 3 years as a law student and a single mother, because we don't have policies in place. We have them there to help people slightly, but not necessarily to help them transition out of poverty. And everyone won't have the wherewithal and the patience and the work ethic, and I'm not saying they don't want to work, but it's hard to commute 3 hours, 184 miles away from your families just to have a better opportunity. And we have to do better as a country. We have to do better as leaders. We have to do better as candidates. We have to be honest. We have to present our own material, and we have to be sincere. Thank you.
Social Security should never be cut. Prices, cost of living have increased. We should be increasing Social Security payments. We do that by increasing the income cap. There's broad bipartisan consensus for that. SNAP benefits have been a prime target by Republicans. I don't know why, because it supports our farmers. One program that would be great is like doubling the SNAP money that you can, at farmers markets, so that some of our neighbors can go and get fresh produce to put on the table for their kids. As far as these housing programs and stuff, we absolutely need to update these, and not just to move out of the 15th district, but to stay here and make our families thrive. I really think a lot of the programs, that the real problem is making sure that they're accessible. They shut down a whole bunch of the Medicaid offices throughout the 15th district because it's so rural. What we need to do is make those services more mobile, and so that we bring the Medicaid office to each one of these towns throughout the month. And that's something that we need to make and streamline that process for people, because they often don't have broadband access where they live. And until that happens, we need to get the service to them, and that will help them access these services, not just to move to Chicago. Thank you.
So I think just about every one of those programs is something that I've either used or I'm currently on. Social Security, I've paid into that for many years, and I'm definitely going to need it because I'm also part of TRS. So I got 10% of my money as a teacher going out. I'm a Tier 2 employee. So that's a plan that the government has officially designated as a Ponzi scheme. They've said it's illegal. And so I'm not sure what I'm going to be getting for a retirement. So all those programs, food stamps, WIG, yeah, I've been on them. Unemployment insurance, I have a whole collection of mail-in debit cards and WIG cards and link cards that I've used over the years. And I've many times had to use that while running an extension cord across the yard to the neighbor's house so I can keep my electricity on. And right now, the only reason my 2-year-old daughter has health care is because I haven't gotten around to marrying my wife, so that way I have to add another $1,500 onto our insurance premium. So we're using Obamacare right now, or Illinois Medicaid right now. So those are all programs that are essential. And I guess maybe I'm that welfare queen that Ronald Reagan was talking about, except I'm not really living that large, and the people like me aren't living that large either. I'm not living high off the hog in my 2-bedroom, 1.5-bedroom bathroom townhouse that we get as part of rent control. So that's not exactly, with our Mayor Illinois Power Aid and our water aid as well. So those are all things that people absolutely need. And until we fully fund those systems, we're never going to see that wage growth, the other stuff that we need to have to pull people like that, people like myself, out of poverty. In 2013, I made $8,500. Now in 2020, I just got my tax return, I made $46,000. And it seems like I really haven't gone that much further, even though I made 4 times what I made before. I'm really not doing that much better. So we need to help these people out.
I didn't get to the point of how to actually fund it. It's like the top earners on the high end of that Social Security scale, I see them, there's not that many around, but at least where I'm from, but they're happy with their Medicare and their insurance and stability going forward. It's the other end where we have to fund. So, keep them flat on the high earners and increase it on the bottom. And do that, increase the payroll tax on the very high earners, bring it up to, why is the millionaire paying the same as somebody that's making $5,000 or $8,000 or $20,000 in their payroll taxes? And also you can tax those high earners on their high investment income. Thank you.
This is why it's important to have someone who has lived the experiences and is aware of the people that they serve. First, the welfare queen was a stereotypical, disrespectful, and degrading statement and presentation made. And as a Black woman, I have offense that you would present that here. That's not okay. And we've had these conversations before, and I need you to be mindful of what you say to people when you're representing them. As it relates to Social Security, we have a generation of people who were promised something and they deserve it, and we're not going to cut that. As it relates to mobile resources, I agree with Kevin Gaither. However, I want to be very certain to make sure that you all understand that I presented that several times, that is my platform, is to bring in mobile units for health care, for people who are veterans, for people who need social services, for our women, for our children, for our mental health patients. So I appreciate you presenting that, but that was my platform. As it relates to broadband access, our governor just signed into legislation $430 million that he's going to invest for those services, and I'm sorry you're gonna have to cut me off, because when we talk about making $8,500, I am, but I want to be very clear, that was not a one-income household. So when you talk about people in poverty, we have people who are living like myself, who are presenting on a family for one income at $8,500. So let's be accurate.
I've lived in poverty most of my adult life, and I believe pretty much everybody almost on this entire panel has lived in poverty. They've lived this in the 15th District shoes. We understand how difficult it is to live, work, and struggle to get out of poverty. It is a very difficult situation. It is not easy. And whoever's ideas they are, it is so important that we promote them and that we get them out there. If that's not your first idea out of your mouth, why in the world isn't it, if it's your idea? I believe we must fight tooth and nail to give people opportunities to get themselves out of poverty. And it is a community issue, and it's something we all have to work together on. Thank you.
So I spent the first 2 minutes telling you guys about how poor I was, but we didn't do too much about how we're actually going to fund those things. And that's what I find, as someone who's lived in poverty all of his adult life, the most offensive thing. Because when you look at our budget, it goes mostly to Social Security, the military, and then intra-transactional costs. So that means that what we pay for welfare, all those social programs, is a pittance of what we spend otherwise. So that's why when we come to healthcare, all those things like that, cost is very important, and there are certainly plans for that. But since I'm a person that's running for the people, since that's what I've done all my life as a missionary, I'm not co-opting this movement. I lived it. It is me. So what I take most offense to is the idea that somehow I'm not entitled to own the same stereotypes that have been used against me for all of my adult life. Because I'm tired of Republicans co-opting that language and trying to tell me that I'm lazy, because I've worked my whole life. I've worked 60 hours a week, and I know when my time is up. Thank you.
In recent years, Danville, right here in Vermillion County, had the highest rate of violent crime among all cities in Illinois, including Chicago. If elected, what funding will you support to prevent violence by limiting easy access to guns and by fostering education and employment of young adults in our district?
My plan would be to get federal funding that would support more diversion programs, and as it relates to education and training, of course, people need to be trained for jobs. People need to have access to that. They need to have employment opportunities. They need to have secure housing. They need to have food security. Those things would be where I would focus. They need to have the opportunity to, in terms of access to guns, I would be supportive of more legislation that would restrict and regulate the background checks and purchasing of guns at gun shows, because we know that those guns can be purchased and not easily tracked and then can be funneled into other neighborhoods. I think the diversion programs are vital because it gives people an opportunity to identify potential offenders. It gives you an opportunity to give them the resources and the mentorship that they need. We need to make sure that we invest into mentoring programs, the Boys and Girls Clubs, after-school programs, and those things need to be supported with federal dollars. Thank you.
Violence is a serious issue. I don't know about anybody else, but it's affected me personally. It's affected people in this room I know personally as well. It's something very serious, and it's not something that's going to go away with any policy. It is something that's going to take, once again, the community coming together, us educating the criminal justice system, us making specific changes to it. We do need universal background checks, even though, despite over 90% approval from the American people, we can't get that through Congress. We really need to demand this of our representatives. And you look on the other side of the aisle, and on a billboard in Coles County, on Mary Miller's thing, it says 2A, and I know what that means. It means Second Amendment, and it means without any regard for people. I'm a Second Amendment supporter, but I'm also a person who supports peace and prosperity for all people. And telling people if they just got a job, that all of a sudden the violence in their neighborhood would go away is also a bit disrespectful of the people that have lost their lives. We do need to support diversion programs, especially these court systems where if you get a drug offense that you can not go get a record, where you can actually get treatment as opposed to just going straight into prison. We need to stop that pipeline. And thankfully in this state we've begun that process, but it's only just begun. We really, there are some really great pilot programs of this in more north of here. We should use those and fund those. Thank you.
I was just thinking here of trying to pull out my wallet. I used to carry around student IDs of students that I lost due to gun violence or violence in some way. And actually this last year my wallet broke in half, so I have to just keep one at a time, the last student that I lost to gun violence. It's one of the reasons why I ran. It's one of the reasons I do what I do. It's one of the reasons why I've been a missionary, why I've worked helping other people regardless of faith or political party my whole life. And I can tell you right now, the kids that I've lost to gun violence, they don't care about Republicans or Democrats. They don't care or know who the congressman in their district is. And so that's why we're still good. There we go. So that's why I've actually got into this race to try to help protect those people, my kids. I've also talked about doing things that'll work. And so one of the things that I've pushed over and over again as a nonpartisan solution to this gun problem, this gun crisis in our country, is that we could go after the biggest supplier of illegal firearm sales. Dealers, FFL, licensees, leasers who are violating the terms of their gun lease. That's who sells the most weapons. And our government under Obama's presidency compiled a list of over 3,000 of those violations, something you can Google right now if you like. And under the Trump administration, we've largely stalled in enforcing that. That's something that we could do tomorrow as good Democrats by increasing funds and federal regulation over programs like that could have a noticeable change. That's something I've been pitching for the last 6 months as a values-based approach to trying to solve this gun problem. I think that over the last couple of years, over this last couple of months, a lot of you have realized, and I've talked on the phone, that this is a great solution. It's something that we could do, and it's something that doesn't have to infringe on individual liberties, but it's also something that can help have a noticeable effect in lowering crime. Thanks.
First of all, we need to restore funding to the CDC and stop whittling away at their budget. It's probably very important right now with the coronavirus coming along, but getting back to the gun violence, we need to restore the funding and restore the mandate for the CDC to re-study gun violence in America and come up with solutions and guidelines for health professionals. Being a health professional, it is very important to me, gun safety. I think we should ask every family what they do regarding gun safety, and I'm not sure if that happens in my community. On the flip side of that, we're in an age of technology revolution that doubles by the month, it seems like, at my age. And I see my kids with a smartphone and it turns on with this picture of his face, but then we have a gun and all you have to do is pull a trigger. It makes no sense to me. We have to come up with some kind of standardized gun safety nationwide. Also, another big thing to me is we need to standardize and implement a nationwide conceal and carry, so every state is on board with that. Thank you.
So just briefly, drug court does help in terms of people who have offenses that are drug related. That clearly is not solving the issue as it relates to gun violence in the neighborhoods that we are referring to and in our district. So that would be an example of a program that we could use as either a diversion program or a substantive program to assist as it relates to gun violence. But there are two totally separate ideas, and one is not necessarily impacting the other in the way that we would like to do so. We would also need to fund our communities and give them job opportunities, because if you look at where the largest amount of gun violence is, it is in communities that are impoverished, where they do not have housing, where they do not have food, and they do not have employment. And so to assume that we could resolve one without addressing the other is not very responsible and is not accurate. Thank you.
We can also support Crime Stoppers in towns like Danville. Mr. Bud and I went actually to the regional meeting here in Danville sometime last year. We need to support those programs with more resources. Also, public defender programs in rural America are particularly under-resourced. We need to provide more money and more resources for the people, because poverty is often criminalized. Beyond that, it's so important that we get into the communities and the neighborhoods and listen to the people that are living there, and connect those stories directly to the the, uh, the, uh, 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 uh,
So even though I've talked about the plan already, I think in a larger sense what I can talk about for about 40 seconds is this idea of consensus that we lack in this country. You know, when you look at that assault weapons ban that expired a couple years back, they did a report on it, and while a lot of us Democrats argue that there was some things that worked about it and we should have kept it, one of the big findings was that the law didn't have enough time to fully take effect. In other words, we didn't have Democrats around long enough to keep this bill passed. So one thing that we need to do in Congress in terms of a federal problem is build that consensus where we can have an assault weapons ban that can last more than 20 years, that can actually give time to actually work. So building that consensus, trying to have Republicans not overturn everything we do, and having something that's smart and can be amended and sharing those values going to save lives is something that we can do that's common sense, that's nonpartisan, not bipartisan, but it's nonpartisan, and it's something we can do to help save lives and also solve a lot of our other problems in this country too.
Second part of my answer to this is my community, we've been grappling with the school resource officers, how to implement it and how to pay for it. We put 2 officers in 3 schools, and it's quite expensive, and our community is sucking it up and paying for it all on our own. Some kind of guidelines from the federal government need to come down, standardize it, figure out how to pay for it, and do a nationwide implementation if this is the trend that we're moving towards, which is a pretty sad trend, but it looks like it is coming. Thank you.
Failure to protect government whistleblowers from retaliatory action can discourage reports of fraud and negligence. What kind of legislation would you support to protect whistleblowers and to hold unethical government employees and managers accountable?
We already have legislation that protects whistleblowers. What we need to do, obviously, is make sure that people that we elect to Congress hold the executive branch accountable when they threaten the whistleblower protection statutes. This question is obviously about what's happened in the recent impeachment trial of Donald John Trump. It's a very difficult. It's very difficult as a Democrat to have gone into this impeachment thinking that we were going to remove President Trump from office. Senator Romney was the first sitting senator to ever vote to remove a president of his own party from office. And that's a very serious thing that he voted for. It's also we had bipartisan support for witnesses, for hearing witnesses, and it was a partisan vote to not let the American people hear from witnesses, to let them have their testimony and let the American people decide for themselves. It was bipartisan to hear those witnesses. It was bipartisan effort to let the whistleblowers, have their moment, and we should always protect them. There's countless, just like today, Blagojevich is, free, and he bargained Obama's Senate seat, and President Trump, just because he knows him, let him go. And
thank you. That's
thank
a good
you.
way to end.
So this is another issue that's very personal to me, and in fact, I actually cannot tell you all about my experiences as being a whistleblower, but yeah, I've had to go through that too, trying to stand up for people in the LGBT community at my school and finding myself retaliated against and having to go through my labor union to try to make sure that I'm protected. So I want to make sure that other people are as protected as I am when they're trying to stand up for other people's rights as well. And a lot of times our whistleblowers in life aren't perfect looking. They're loud and they're obnoxious and they say things that people don't want to hear. But it's very important that we have those people, and it's very important that we protect them and make sure that those loud, irritating, annoying, obnoxious voices can speak the truth clearly and give some transparency to this world. And so that's one thing I want to keep on supporting. Now, we can do that through several ways. When you talk about labor unions in particular, we can fight for larger federal rules that include those things in labor negotiations. That's something that's very important that a lot of labor unions are struggling with right now. Talking about intersectionality, since I have a little extra time on this, if we take some of the slack off of unions with Medicare for all, and they don't have to negotiate for health care, we can help our unions negotiate for better whistleblower protections as well. So that's one thing that certainly would have helped me out quite a bit in my situation, and I'd like to continue that as well. And then in this, do I have more than 30 seconds? I think that it's so important to remember that these whistleblowers that we've talked about for Trump are not people we would probably normally like. I know some people posted some things about what a hero Colonel Vindman is, and I think that's correct. And that's one of the great things about this country is that a guy who I would probably disagree with 99.9 times out of 100 is a hero right now because he stood up and spoke truth to power and said, look, this is wrong, and we have values that go beyond just being our political party. Thanks.
I agree with Kevin. I thought we had whistleblower laws also. I was flabbergasted and disgusted that what happened with the executive branch and the whistleblower status. But I'm also very upset with the legislator. I mean, we are a nation of checks and balances. We have to check each branch and balance it out. When I am your congressperson, I promise you I'll do my best to check all the other branches and my colleagues in the Congress. Thank you.
Well, I think this is one that we probably all agree on. We do have laws in place that protect people or that are established to protect people who speak up on behalf of others when something is wrong, when they see something unethical, when they see something that is criminal in the workplace, whether it's in government or not. And we have to make sure that people who are there, who are responsible for enforcing that, are doing their jobs. And so some of you have heard me say that I'm a guardian of the process. That's because that's what I do. I hold people to their burden. I require that they do their jobs, whether I like them or not, whether I like the answer or not. And that's what I would do. I would want to make sure that every person that is sitting with me in Congress is doing their job. I would want to make sure that everyone that is sitting on the other side of the aisle is doing their job. And that's what we have to do. We can't really change those laws because that would have to come by way of the Supreme Court, and a member of Congress doesn't have any influence over the Supreme Court. But we can make sure that we are enforcing the laws as we have the power to do, and that's what I would do. I would make sure that we're doing that. It's important that we be mindful of what we can and cannot do and what we have in place. And a large part of the reason that these things aren't working is because of the people who are currently in office. And we need to have ethical leaders. We need to have ethical candidates. We need to be able to elect people who are going to do the job and who can demonstrate that they can be ethical and transparent now, not just on a promise that they'll do it later. And so we need to get rid of people who aren't doing the job. Thank you.
I think the other part of this question was the labor portion, and I do think what we should do is make this right to work stuff and get rid of it across the country. I think that's the biggest thing, because right to work is right to work for less. It's one of the worst things that we could ever do. In states that have passed it, wages have stagnated, and we need to make sure that we stand with workers wherever they are, because workers are not making enough money. Workers should be paid more for work, and when we pass legislation that stands with workers, what that does is it protects them and gives them the ability to negotiate together. And that is exactly where we should stand. That is how you stand with labor unions and workers. Thank you.
So one thing to add in this last minute is that, even though we do have protections for whistleblowers, I consider them to be somewhat nominal. And I think as evidence of that, anybody here that wants to take your phone and look up who Donald Trump's whistleblower can find their name. And they can find out all kinds of dirty info about how they were apparently a Democratic donor and lots of other stuff. Even though Rand Paul was prevented legally from saying the name of that whistleblower on the floor of the Senate, You can go on any Facebook group, and in fact, I've got a couple right now that I kind of sneak on, or you can find them saying his name, like in Fight Club, like I am Robert Paulson's not the name of the guy's name, it's the name of the guy in Fight Club, but that's what they're saying, because they're holding up this guy's name and he's facing threats from his family, threats against his family, threats against him, and threats against this person's career. So what we need to do is expand these protections in the 21st century so that we have a subclass of people who read their news on substandard sites like Breitbart and can find these people's names. We need to be able to make sure those people are protected. That's important.
I keep going back. Imagine if these whistleblowers did not come forward, and we have another election that has been tampered with, and we have, I don't want to think about it, this president here for another term. Ukraine, we would have a president, a chief executive, they're already exposed to bribery and blackmail. If this whistleblower didn't come forward, another election tampered with, just imagine the consequences of that. That is a national security issue. And the checks and balances in this process do not work. Thank you.
Why are educational opportunities absent within our prison systems, state and federal? How are we supposed to believe that inmates will not re-offend if not given better skills?
All right, so thanks for that question, because once again, I've got a personal connection to that. I had a lot of my family that's been locked up and needed a new job when they got out. So yeah, I'm wondering the same thing. Why is it that we have this kind of, and as a teacher as well, I'm definitely, one of the things I'm most concerned about is this school to prison pipeline. My high school is about less than half a mile away from the nearest prison, and unfortunately there is a pipeline going right there. And it's the fault of teachers like myself, administrators, parents, community members, and even people outside that community. What we need to do in terms of prison reform, which is an issue that I care deeply about, is first off make sure that we continue to take away the ability for corporations and people to profit off of locking people up. And then we need to revamp and remodel our penal system to be truly rehabilitative, to follow the examples of other European and Eastern European or Western European nations that have had success in rehabilitating their prisoners.
I agree with a lot of what John said. First thing that popped in my mind is why do we have so many prisoners in our system and why for so long? Prison reform has got to be one of our hot topics for the next generation. We're spending way too much money just locking people up. We need to think out of the box, understand what the situation is, and move forward from there. It's just unthinkable it's a crisis. It's one of my lists, 9 or 10 crises affecting the nation. Profiteering off this, and we need real rehabilitation and prison reform. It's just not a buzzword. I do truly believe that. Thank you.
So the recidivism rate is not solely a factor that's impacted by education alone, but when you ask why we don't have education accessible to our inmates, it is mostly because education in prisons is primarily the responsibility, and it's facilitated by community colleges. And community colleges rely a lot on funding, and we're not getting funding to our community colleges. We don't have enough adjuncts to be there and teach these courses because we don't pay our adjuncts enough. As a prior adjunct, I can tell you that we get about maybe a couple $1,000s a semester, and people are not going to be able to travel and live off of that money and then go and educate people in the prison system. So we need to make sure our community colleges receive the proper funding, because higher education is receiving less federal and state funding than they did before. They're now solely dependent on, or mostly dependent on, tuition dollars. And so we have to do our jobs as legislators to make sure that these systems and these institutions are funded so they can hire people to work in the system. Thank you.
We need prison reform. Let's get rid of this for-profit stuff. It's garbage. Any kind of privatization always ends up costing more. I can't believe that we're actually charging inmates in some locations for books. So if you have no money on your books, you can't actually get a book and read in prison. This kind of, just literally cutting the knees off of people, and making it so that they can't improve themselves while they're in prison is debilitating and increases recidivism rates. I agree. Higher education, we need to increase funding. But we need to make prison reform a priority for the U.S. House and for the Democratic Caucus. Thank you.
In regard to the Veterans Administration and veterans issues, what would set you apart in your support for veterans assistance?
Well, obviously I grew up in healthcare and trained at a number of VAs. And they should be a model of our national healthcare system. For 6 months when I was a bright-eyed pharmacy student, I kind of thought it was until I got out in the real world. The VA healthcare system is the backbone of VA veterans benefits, I believe, and everything else can tie from there. So we truly need to support that, upgrade it, and also be aware of the baby boomer veterans coming along and be ready for them, because they're going to be hitting the system very shortly. Thank you.
What I would do to be supportive of our Veterans Administration is, as you heard me mention before, I believe that we need to get more mobile units, and that would include something for our veterans. We know that our veterans are not getting the assistance that they need. They're not getting the treatment that they need. They are calling in. They are consulting private firms because they need access, because they're not getting what they need. The wait time is too long. They're being pushed off to other facilities, or they're having to drive large distances for health care, and they're still being denied. We know that they need to have mental health services. The suicide rate for our veterans is climbing at disturbing rates, and we need to be able to provide them with mental health services. And so I would be supportive of getting mobile units and getting them more access to the care that we promised them. We promised people that if they enlist and they fight for this country, that they would be protected and cared for, and we're not meeting that burden. We shouldn't have homeless veterans. So we need to have housing for them, and we know that some of our Veterans Administration facilities have housing accessible, but they don't all have it. Thank you.
The VA, there's a lot of good things, and there's a lot of things that we need to fix. We do need to increase the resources that for outreach, and for a lot of veterans, it's just really hard to ask for help. There's a lot of pride there that they just don't want to. They don't want to say that they need the services. So we need to actually go to them and provide the services directly to them wherever they live. I've done a number of the veterans food pantries throughout the district, and the veterans just don't come to show up because they either don't know about it, or they don't want to say that they need the food, and let me tell you, they do need it. The suicide issue is very serious. In my community in Sullivan, we lost somebody last year to suicide. There was a veteran, and because he wanted to go back, he didn't seek the services, and we have to make it a priority that veterans can always access mental health treatment. Thank you.
Another issue that's very close to me, since I was born and raised on military bases, my dad gets his CPAP machine. Any other veterans out here today? I'm guessing there was a veteran that asked that question. Right on. I would guess that, I would say one consistency between Republicans and Democrats over the last 50 years is that neither one of them really seems to care all that much about veterans, because the treatment hasn't gotten that much better. I can tell you that one thing that most veterans are sick about is going in with depression and getting a prescription for 2 Motrin, right? So what we need to do is spend some more money. That's why this is one of those great reasons why I say it's all about values. Because Republican, Democrat, both of them are spending money making the military-industrial complex and Boeing and all these other people lots and Armalite, lots and lots of money. But it seems like none of that's trickling down to the poorest people, which, by the way, are veterans. Those are the people that make up our enlisted ranks are the poorest, the weakest, the meekest, the sickest, the people that join because they have no other option, and that's what they need to do. And so we need to protect those people. We made a promise. Thank you.
Considering the shrinking population in rural Illinois, how can funding for infrastructure be justified?
It can be justified because the people that are here still matter. And that's the thing. We have to make sure that people understand that every person that's here, they matter. We don't get to dismiss the remaining population just because some people have transitioned out of the district. And so you keep investing into the people who are here. Thank you.
You start by having a forward vision for the district that focuses on each community, knowing their strengths and knowing how to lift that community back into the economy. We do that by, with, the program we started rolling out yesterday in Rossville, which is, a historic building and small business working group where we take somebody from the representative's office and we get with contractors, we get with people on the town council and the county board and members of the community, and we work finding federal funds, federal programs, and state funds, state programs, and work together to take these crumbling buildings, these buildings that are beautiful, beautiful parts of our communities, and turn them around and give a springboard for people and for young people to say it's like there is something to live for and to stay here for. Thank you.
That's a really great question. It's a great example of this intersectionality. It's funny how it works out, but it turns out that helping other people, doing the right thing, building up your communities actually turns out to be the most cost-effective and financially stable thing to do. So, it turns out that when you invest in construction projects, in contracting projects, in road projects, that has a direct positive benefit on the economy. So how can we justify it? Because it actually does two things at once. It not only repairs those businesses and buildings and our infrastructure, but it also helps boost the economy. So it does two things at once. And by the way, we can also do that with just 15 seconds left. We can also do that by subsidizing and investing in small businesses that help reduce our carbon footprint for concrete and other materials, to increase solar energy, to increase alternative fuel source usage. So all those things can actually be of a benefit to all areas of society. We don't have to sacrifice one for the other.
I've been in the rural area for 50 years, or going back and visiting my family there. I believe the population loss is because of the infrastructure. There's no justification. It's the infrastructure that is causing the population loss, in my opinion. We need high-speed internet. Just in my city, I have daughters and sons that drive into town, stay at their parents' house just so they can have high-speed internet to do their job and work from home. We need the roads, bypasses for the farmers, and sewers, and also increase the education for our workforce in that area. Also, another thing that we work really strongly on city council is parks and recreation. You gotta make it fun and a livable area for a family to move back in, and that's why I did it. Thank you.
Some believe that government health care will bankrupt our working class families. Yet some nonprofit hospitals like St. Jude's and Shriners succeed. Please share your thoughts.
There's a lot of talking across or past each other on this issue. If we did government health care, it wouldn't bankrupt the country. It would save a lot of money, but I don't think that's, but we couldn't implement the program as is. We have some structural problems with the information technology systems. What we need to do here is take a step-by-step approach. Make sure that the administrative costs for hospitals, which are through the roof, are driven down. I think that's what you'll see in those hospitals that you mentioned. Their administrative costs are very low. They also have a lot of people contribute tons of money in order to provide health care. That's the difference. A lot of the not-for-profit hospitals, the way that they get to not-for-profit levels, actually not having a profit, is by building and building every single year. Thank you.
So back to my point from the last question about it turns out that helping other people actually is cost effective. There was just a study released from Yale talking about how Medicare for All would actually be less than what people have expected, be more cost efficient. So those are things that we can do. But even if Medicare for All is more expensive, even if it's not cost effective, I really don't care. I'd rather spend more money and not have people die. Is that a position? Do I have 30 seconds? Let me repeat that one more time. I'd rather if I didn't have to die from a pilonidal cyst. And that can be treated with antibiotics. I don't want to gross anyone out. It can be treated with antibiotics. It almost killed me. I'd rather if we didn't do that. I really don't care how much it costs. We didn't ever ask how much money it would cost to drop all those bombs on Afghanistan. We didn't ask for all those bombs that we dropped over Baghdad. But somehow we're worried that it costs too much money to help poor people. So even if it does cost more money, I don't care.
I look at it as without health care, you can't have small businesses in your community. People get latched onto their factory job or a high-paying job or are stuck in a job. We need to have affordable care with the Affordable Care Act in our communities. What makes me really nervous in what I'm seeing in our communities is all the consolidation in the hospitals, and it's turning into monopoly when they're calling it capitalism. For the last 20, 30 years, they say capitalism will bring the cost of health insurance down. And I'm sorry that has been proven wrong, but we keep hearing that. Thank you.
As it relates to, I believe that we all agree that this is connected to the Affordable Health Care Act and or Medicare for All. The research shows that it can be done without bankrupting the government. In fact, it would save money overall. The problem is, again, making sure that our legislators vote and the Appropriations Committee permits and appropriates funding for that program. It wouldn't bankrupt the system. The reason that these hospitals survive the way that they do is because of the funding, and we just have to make sure that we get funding for our healthcare program that supports everyone in this district and everyone in our country. Thank you.
As a member of Congress, would you support better access to comprehensive women's health care for teens, including mobile clinics? Explain your answer.
That's another issue that's very important to me. And my first thought on that is almost losing one of my students to depression. It got a lot worse than that, but we almost lost her because we didn't have those services available to young people. And fighting for that's another reason why we can make this about values, not issues. When you talk to Republicans about, well, let's provide birth control and let's have abortion services for them, they're overwhelmingly against those things. But when you reframe it as a personal liberty issue, when you reframe those issues as values about protecting your family, making sure that they have, and that these unprotected people are protected by society, all of a sudden those same conservative voters are in favor of those kind of values. And so that's the kind of things that I want to push.
First of all, in my practice on a daily basis, it is very difficult to talk about teens and contraceptives or even anything healthcare related to teens. We really need guidelines. We've been asking for them. All healthcare professionals have been asking for guidelines from the government or CDC or whoever it needs to come from to how that conversation starts. Right now, it is just in the doctor's office and the nurse practitioner, but there's a whole slew of healthcare options out there, and it's very, very difficult without guidelines or support from the legal side. Thank you.
I am absolutely in support of mobile units for healthcare, especially for young girls and teens when it comes to comprehensive women's care. I think the important thing to note is that as of right now, if I take my daughters to the doctor, they have the option, they have the right to go into that office and meet with their physician and they have privacy. They don't have to disclose certain things to me. Their bodies are theirs. If it's something that is a risk and it needs to be reported to me, that's different. And we need to know that those things are in place right now. And I would definitely support the ongoing care that allows young girls to have the ability to protect and make decisions as it relates to their bodies with the consultation of their medical professionals and their parents. And it needs to be available. And so unless it's some issue that is life-threatening or that needs to be disclosed, yes, I would support them having that opportunity. Thank you.
Yes, I actually provided sexual health education in inner city schools that had, pregnancy rates and STD rates, which were much higher than the national average. You could not believe the statistics in those two schools. We absolutely have to provide these vital prevention tools and health tools to these students, and it may make people uncomfortable, but we have to face reality. What we're going to be facing with the Republican challenger is somebody that doesn't face health, doesn't face science, and doesn't face facts. And I've been facing those kinds of people down my entire life. Thank you.
Okay, so let's go ahead and have our candidate closing statements now. They get 1 minute each, and we will start with Craig Morton.
I'd like to thank everybody coming out this evening. I really appreciate it. The Danville Community College and Vermillion County Democratic Party. Sorry, I gotta read that. Everything kind of blends together. I want to reiterate, I've lived healthcare all my life, and that would be my priority. What we are doing now is unsustainable. I can go back to the Affordable Care Act and the reasonings behind that. You can always catch me later. Secondly, I am here for the 15th District and our rural communities. I want to reiterate, I've been watching our communities, especially in my area, it's just death by 1,000 cuts. I am afraid my children and grandchildren, one day it's going to be grocery store deserts, furniture store deserts, and pharmacy deserts. And that terrifies me. So I want to ask for your vote March 17th and again in November. Thank you.
I just really want to say, I think it's important that we remember that it's not just having the understanding of what the district is facing, but having the ability to advocate for this district, for our people in DC, to understand what that role means, how critical that is, what we can do in DC and what we cannot do, what the legislative branch actually does. I want you to know that I'm serious about this. This is not just a fleeting thing for me. I didn't enter this race lightly. I entered it wholeheartedly, and I want to continue to work for people. That's what I've been doing. I've been an advocate, and I want to continue to advocate for the people of the 15th District. I believe that I am the best person for the 15th District. I am the best person for this nomination, and I'll say it over and over again. I'm the best person to represent this district, our district in the DC. Thank you.
My name is Kevin Gaither. I grew up in this district. I live in this district. I love this district. I'm your ground-up candidate. I literally been put foot in ground in every community. I've got the Chicago Tribune endorsement because they know of all the candidates in either party that that I understand the struggles of regular folk. And also people that have it much harder. I will work tooth and nail to fight for our values and our principles every single day. And I am looking for your support, your help, and your vote. My name is Kevin Gaither. Thank you so much.
So thank you guys all for coming out. I really appreciate it. Just to repeat the message that I've been saying over and over again. I haven't just spent my whole life looking out for the poor, the weak, the meek, the sick, the addicted, the forgotten, the imprisoned. That's also me too. So I embody those values as well. And that's what I think more than anything, if you're looking for a moderate candidate, then I'm not moderate in terms of policies. I think I'm clearly the progressive option. But one way I am moderate is those values, the same values that those 40,000 Republicans who need to flip this district have. And so it's those values I share. It's that messaging, that's that way of messaging that I can accomplish by talking to them. And that's why I think that not only can I be the choice in this district for the primaries, but I also stand a shot at winning against the Republican opponent as well. Thank you.
What I want to say here is that I really, really, really appreciate these 4 people and what they've taken on. I know a little something about what it's like to campaign in this district. It's huge. 33 counties. I call it the land between 3 rivers. The Wabash on the east, the Ohio River on the south, all the way down there, and it goes almost to the Mississippi in the west. Huge place, the biggest congressional district in east of the Mississippi, not just in Illinois, as far as the number of counties. So it's quite an undertaking, and I really admire every single one of these candidates. I appreciate what they're doing. I see good things in all of them. I really do. And I could see each one of these people having some kind of leadership role in this state. I seriously mean that.